Hi, this is gonna be a video about what I consider as challenging in my mental health and in my life, and what other people probably don't find it so challenging by looking at my failures and abusing me. Even throughout all my life, I just encounter so many people, and probably a lot of them were very good, but most of them were very damaging to me. You can't really change what your mind tells you when something bad happens, and your brain just it's particularly interested in bad things. It's really hard to forget really bad things, and at the same time it's really easy to forget like small short breaks of happiness. And I probably had a bunch of those that I probably forget. Those little moments, I think it was the only ones that made me overcome so many abuse and challenge. Probably some people just give up on the first try and give in to the idea that who's abusing you wins and you're a victim, and you're gonna carry on being a victim because you don't have luck in your life in finding the right kind of people. Now, it's really hard to find the right kind of people. So if you're in a situation like me that you haven't found the right people either to work with or live with, it's really, really hard. And depending on the family that God chooses for you, or the location in the planet, you would find that some have more advantages and some have less advantage. Some are more privileged, some are less. But everyone has the right to be equal in a court of law. And when you understand that you're equal, then you have the chance to win along the line. Obviously, if you're not lucky, you're gonna lose a couple of times, then you rise your head again, start again. In my case, I struggled for a very long time because I haven't I paid special interest in people that probably feel the same as I do, but I don't find the right time to diagnose myself with mental health issues, because obviously you feel like you have something in common with people that struggle with those symptoms, and you think that you're different than them, that maybe you have in some degree but it's not serious. For example, people that have schizophrenia or something very serious, like, you know that, for example, people like with schizophrenia act like a baby all the time, even if they're like adults. So you do act like a baby or a kid sometimes, but it doesn't categorize you as with schizophrenia because you act like a child sometimes. You know, it's just if you have normal way of doing your life, like you were speaking like a baby all the time, or you're acting like one, then obviously you have schizophrenia. Maybe you just went through something very traumatic and you start behaving like that because you're stuck in that behavior, the way that traumatized you. In my case, I've been through domestic violence and very aggressive physical abuse with my father and my family. And although that didn't give me like schizophrenia or something like that, the way I coped with that, it was just finding out people that maybe have the same symptoms as me. But I never had the courage to assume that I had gender dysphoria or body dysmorphia or anything like that. And the way I had to cope with it was in a Facebook blog where I just stalked in the videos for the longest time, and then sometimes I was just like, put very regimental like sort of criteria that my video had to last less time, but at the same time I was like wasting so much time of my life just talking into a camera and making my own like delusion of reality, and that I think it's real when I say it's a delusion, because until I finally assumed my gender and my condition is like gender dysphoria and body dysmorphia, and well, I'm gonna come back to the next one, the one that I want to the other one that I'm not saying, which is racial imposter syndrome. I want to come back to that in a minute, but I'm speaking about gender and things like, transgender and stuff like that. So I always assumed that I had those delusions about my gender, and that's how society made me feel, and people disappointed me as a man who feels attracted by a female or man, or maybe more man than female, but still have a bit of like, same sex, different opposite sex attraction and some sex attraction, but mostly same sex attraction. So I felt like society disappointed me as a gay man, and therefore I was disappointed at society. I was frustrated, and I was just as a gay man disappointed how people treated me. And obviously I came to realization that was a part of racial imposter syndrome, which makes me feel like not just about my gender, but also about my appearance as well, I don't know what my appearance is like, so that's why I struggle to identify a culture or race that I identify with. So there's no point in like traveling the world and finding out some person that probably has the same syndrome, or maybe it's different than me. I'm never gonna find someone exactly the same. But the point is, I just have to realize that I have those, because until now I just thought like, oh, so I'm being disappointed as a normal gay man, but in fact I'm struggling to recognize that, not just because I don't assemble with any race or people that even ask me where I'm from. They can't really say where exactly my roots are in just looking at me. And I've been asked many times where I'm from, and been told like I look like Chinese, French, or whatever else. Literally I could go anywhere around the world and people will still ask me where I'm from, even if I'm not my country of origin. Obviously, if I speak Portuguese, but if they hear me speak English, they wouldn't tell if I'm Portuguese or not. And even if I spoke Portuguese, maybe I've been in Portugal for a long time and not been born here. But normally, you would assume someone is from the country when you speak fluent. So, besides that, there's no really racial symmetric behavior that I can assemble with, and that is actually very, very typical of me, that I struggle with that, which is not very like deep. It's fine. It's not very like serious or anything, but because I struggle with that and I don't understand it on the like simple basis of describing a syndrome, I end up struggling way more in life and thinking that it's because I'm a gay man that people are discriminating me. And in fact, it's not because I'm a gay man, it's because I'm a woman. And I have racial imposter syndrome, which makes it even more hard to recognize that I just don't identify as the sex assigned at birth, but also I don't identify as any race. I'm just like basically empty page. And as if I don't have anything right in that page. It's just any white background maybe, but rather than that, there's nothing that I assemble with. And obviously in the past we discriminated so many people based on the color of their skin or the way they look, that just I don't even recognize being white because my family says I'm white, but then people from oriental backgrounds or things, they're not white and they don't understand, so I don't really understand if I'm white, if I'm not. My family says I'm white, but I don't identify as being white or with any racial background really. So any place I go, I would never have people with a specific racial background, I suppose, and identify as female or male and look like female or male, or with specific racial background, probably sit down in a coffee and know for sure that discrimination will be prevented because they, based on the way they look, they're not going to be discriminated. And for me, I never have that safety because I don't even believe I'm white or any racial background, and I don't identify as male, so I'll behave like something that probably people always understood that I was, and people from outside were probably more aware, as for me, Maria, than Philip or Louis. But at the end of the day, I would not recognize, I wouldn't say to myself, I'm Maria. I'll still act like a male or pretend I'm a male and have a fixed racial background that prevents me from being discriminated. And at the same time, I always felt discriminated. So not just because Portugal is a very racist country. In their roots, they're very racist. So even if I was born in a majorly racist country, I would end up being discriminated anywhere in the world because of my syndrome. So I can't really say that it's because the place where I am or the place where I'm traveling to. And in my mind, I'm always like saying, well, these people really discriminate me and I'm going for another place where they're not discriminating me. And at the end of the day, if I'm like traveling around and starting my life over again and over again, it would just end up being very catastrophic for someone, because I don't have a common ground anywhere I lived for the last 22 years. I do understand I'm very young and I still have a lot of time in front of me, and only now it comes to light that I have racial imposter syndrome and all the other things, body dysmorphia and gender dysphoria. I never said them like that. I never looked up in the internet the symptoms. I always based on people that I met, friends that I encounter. I wasn't based on people that had those symptoms. I just I prefer to meet people in real life that tells me what experiences as a human being, if you identify as something else than what you were when you were signed a birth with. And it seems like it's very easy, and people tell you they did a great job in accepting diversity, but for me it doesn't really matter, because anywhere I'll be, I always feel afraid that they're gonna discriminate me based on me being unable to fit in any criteria or typicality, of gay looking person. And I'm not even, so the only thing that would be typically would be with other trans people, and that's the only place I would be comfortable, where people just meet us differently. And obviously there's transgender people that are very feminine in the news or in films and things, and obviously there's other trans women which are just trans women, and they probably have very female looking faces, very male looking faces, and those are the ones that shouldn't be discriminated, and those are the ones that we need to fight for. And maybe put our hair back, or put a jumper on, or don't shave our face for 2 days, because nobody's gonna look at us except one of our friends when we talk to them online or something. Those kind of things is simply the things that we need to be fighting for, and not just the ones that look exactly like female and already been through all the surgeries that they could find and look perfect. But we have to look at the people that are transitioning and struggle with syndromes and delusions, because the world today is so easy in finding delusions and making you delude from reality, because there's so many possibilities, and you end up doing a job that makes you aware of how the world works, and then you have all these possibilities. Well, in the Western world there's all these possibilities that you just have to be born in the Western world to understand. And I think sometimes I just feel very paranoid, because people think that I'm a wild thing and came from third world country that I'm not aware of my rights, or how many women and trans women died so that we had the right, and gay people died, especially like trans people just came to light as not just beautiful women that take a bandage over our faces and end up like being beautiful, or men dressed as women, but also just so many years ago, 50 years ago, gay people were being persecuted and gay bars were being shut down, and like, and you still hear like today in a coffee shop or in a cafe people saying things like women fight so much for their rights, and now men can just become women and look like a frog and have all the rights that women have. And that's, I mean, that's a bit delusional, because I'm not expecting that a large number of men can just do a vaginoplasty and become a woman. I think it's just being very transphobic when you say things like that, because yourself, if you wanted the rights of women, you can't just do that. You should be equal. I'm not saying that, today we think we have exactly, the same rights as being men or women. I probably agree with what he's saying, but not to defend me as a trans woman, to defend men, because men has been treated a bit like women used to be treated like, and the roles have been inverted, and maybe that's my imposter syndrome, racial imposter syndrome speaking, because I don't even look like a typical man, So if I believe that I'm a typical man, and I'm saying these things because I'm a typical man, I'm not a typical man, or I'm not a typical looking man, so I can't really speak for typical looking man, because I've never been in a typical looking man. I tried my best to behave and to dress like a typical looking man, but I can't, because people just seem to know when I'm lying or when I'm trying to pretend to be something else. People look at me and they just know exactly what I'm trying to hide, and then I've never been able to hide that. Maybe for a couple of seconds I tried to pretend I was like very macho male and could become very strong, and then obviously you have those people that think that because I don't act like that, I'm weak, and that's why they abuse me. And for those people, I just have to say, well, I can't really lie to you and act like I'm a really tough guy and act like this like fake person inside me that is very strong and male. And at the same time, I've been discriminated all my life because I never acted like, and I've never identified like a typical looking man. So, and I tried to speak for typical looking men and how women are treated better than them, but I can't really have a say. because it's not just how I feel, it's how it's not just what I feel, what it's a delusion that makes me think that way. And in reality, I feel like a racial imposter. I don't feel like a typical looking man. I feel like a racial imposter. So all this time I was trying to be a propaganda for men to feel proud about themselves and sort of like embrace their masculinity, and you don't need to transition. You just need to realize how typical men looking guys are so mistreated and abused in their lives. And it was just all a delusion, like, it's not even like saying I'm blaming myself for saying those things. I don't even feel like that. I just feel like I've been lying to pretend that I'm something that I'm not. I'm not blaming anyone, because if I would blame people, it's like I'm blaming people for not telling me that I have racial imposter syndrome. How can someone tell me that I have racial imposter syndrome? No, they can't, because even if it's a psychiatrist, I'm not going to speak about that, and it's impossible for them to even recognize that syndrome, because obviously that's how it's supposed to be, like, if you're not even sure of those symptoms, if you're trying to deny and hide who you are, then obviously nobody's gonna be like, you have racial imposter syndrome, because you're trying to hide it. So either they read your mind, well, obviously they do, because they understand my insecurities and they read me and they know why am I weak, because I haven't identified my weaknesses yet. I'm a person who's just like looking to be very vulnerable and have very vulnerable situations in my life, because I'm so used to being having this delusion that I'm this typical guy, that I just wasted all my energy and my time. So when it becomes such a big part of me, and I was just doing things for no reason. I just felt things for no reason. I couldn't explain how I feel to anyone, and I would still be so angry and never feel like I'm myself, just feeling so strange about my identity and having such an identity crisis, that when we came to the tipping point where my work life just went to shit, and my love life just like completely inexistent for so long, it didn't came from external motivation, like someone tells you like get a rip and find out what's wrong with you and move on. No, it's just, you can only, when you're in this situation, either you rely on yourself and motivate yourself, or you just like fall in this rabbit hole and you never find yourself. And a lot of people just live their whole lives like this, just based on the way people look. It can have such an impact on your mental health. and you think that you have to blame yourself for the way you look, and it's not, and I always felt like I'm ashamed for feeling that way about how I look, because I actually don't have any like deformity in my face or anything, and probably a lot of people have it worse than me, but I always blame myself for it, and I never really understood what mental issue I was facing all my life, and I wasn't productive enough in my life. I wasn't upbringing enough to find the motivation to finally face those mental health concerns. So even if I went to very expensive psychiatrists and therapists and say I have body dysmorphia and gender dysphoria, there would be always a part of me that says your illness, you are doing this a part of your delusion. And if I wasn't aware of those other things that were happening to me all my life, I would probably end up like rejecting the fact that I became a woman when I become a woman, or there would still be a huge part of me that I would never understand, because I have racial imposter syndrome. I now can basically understand why am I feeling like this. Anywhere I go, it's not a part of like talking with someone that has a different nationality, or typically that nationality is not very good with foreigners, because all the countries have a specific like racist problem. Like, you know, they always think that they're the best country in the world and things like that, you know what I mean? Like, all of the countries that probably have, you know, a good economy, things like that, and they're probably racist at some level. And if you're just trying to find the right place where nobody's gonna be like that, you know, it's a bit difficult, because although it's like a discrimination and it's like it's not legally acceptable, it's not even socially acceptable. Maybe it is in some countries, who knows, but I'm not even speaking about that. When you identify in yourself what's wrong with yourself, and not trying to put blame on everyone else, because imagine, like, even if you go through all your life and people have been behaving like that to you, and you don't find out that you have racial imposter syndrome, you always put the blame on people that they shouldn't even have the blame, because they're making you feel this way even if they're not there. You're feeling that way because you have a mental illness. No, because maybe because they did it to you, maybe it's so long time in your life, but it's not about them, it's about you. That's why you have to put yourself first, to read the symptoms of your illnesses and understand what you're struggling with and give it a name. Because if you just go all your life into this rabbit hole of blaming and blaming people, and you end up just hating yourself because you don't understand why you feel that way, you don't understand why people treat you like that, and people just keep treating you like that, and you have nothing, you can't do anything about that until you understand within yourself that you don't categorize as a typical looking man anywhere in the world. Not just because you've been trying to hide that for a long time in your life, but also because I feel like I'm a female, I'm a woman all my life, and I was just trying to find the motivation to come out as trans. And I would just see, since I was very 16, I would just see how people transition from male to female. I would just see documentaries about MTF, men to female, hormone therapy around the world, how the mental health system works in different countries. Obviously, you are privileged for having that surgery, where you just have those surgeries to become a female, but it's not like you don't contribute to society because you're a woman. You contribute to society because you become who you finally wanted to become and who you are. And if you're not that person, you can't even have a healthy life at work. So what's the point in going to work when you can't even carry out your life if you're a man and you want to be a female? So you're probably gonna blame on everyone that they don't want you as sort of in between those transitions. There's a strange gap in the middle where you're not either one or other. You're just sort of in between, like me, and you just feel they don't they don't want you for that, and you're not serving your purpose of being like that. And there's no point in working when you're just in the delusion that people won't accept you if you go to work dressed like a woman, or you suddenly decide to change your name and change your gender, and people just scare you. And for me at the moment, it's just very complicated to go to work because of the way I've been treated with my illnesses, and without the need to diagnose them, and just living with them and just pretending that I don't have any problems, and pretend I'm a male, and pretend I'm comfortable with that. It was very hard for me. And I don't know, now it's just, like I said, it's like an empty page where I'm not a female, I'm not a man, because I haven't started my transition, and I don't identify as any racial background, and there's no one I can call that I feel comfortable being friends with without, now I finally began to create friendships where, I'm acting and I'm feeling like this because I have racial imposter syndrome and all of the rest. But before, and I start feeling comfortable, but before, I was just not comfortable being friends with anyone. And the most interesting part is that people weren't comfortable being my friends as well. So I was just wasting my time trying to be comfortable being their friend, because they're not friends. So when I finally identify a friend being really, really your friend, when you're 22, when you finally came out as woman,